Well, we directly are going into the next and the last parts of this session, which is a panel. The panel will feature Nadia and Jonathan, who just spoke, who just gave a keynote. And also, we just heard that she is also is Marta. Marta, are you also with us? Just saying hello. Yes, there you are. Great. I can have a look at the screen. Marta Giter Pikarska. Am I saying this right? Yes, yeah. Wonderful. I practiced this a couple times. Great. Marta, welcome. Marta is the director of the ecosystem at Hyperledger. Hyperledger is part of the Linux Foundation and is an open source collaborative effort creative to advance cross-industry blockchain technologies. And, well, it has become the de facto standard for enterprise blockchain platforms. Marta, welcome. Very happy to also have you with us. Where are you actually calling from today?
Cambridge, UK.
Cambridge, wow! So we have a couple continents together today in the session. That's so great! So great to have the three of you with us today. Let's kick off the session, the panel. It's also about convergence. I think the three of you can give a great overview of what is next, the challenges, of course. Marta, let's start with you. We just heard from Nadia about some interesting failures, about some great developments with governments. The same with Jonathan, of course, with the MiPesa platform. That really was the base for this global collaboration with all the Corona efforts between all the thought leaders globally. I think a great example. Marta, I heard that, and I read actually about vaccinations that are being put on the blockchain by Hyperledger. What's going on? Is this a project by Hyperledger that you are working on?
So let's start from what Hyperledger is, but probably that's the better part.
Sure.
Which is simply, it will explain that Hyperledger is not working on anything. We are an open source collaboration, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So we are kind of a consortium or an umbrella project. We like to call it a greenhouse, where different open source technologies can be hosted, and enterprises can come and kind of have a safe space for developing code bases. So Hyperledger as such is an organization that just provides that space for collaboration from the open source community, from different companies, big, small, and other nonprofit organizations. And we kind of facilitate the discussions and interactions. So indeed, some of our members do have projects like the MiPesa project or a vaccination project. There is a ledger domain project around the supply chain of pharmaceuticals. They are also looking at vaccines and, in general, hopefully future COVID drugs. So there are a lot of efforts here looking at how can different participants in the supply chain participate in and collaborate in a safe way. There are also projects around kind of looking at the immunity passports, and if this is something that we want to do, which also obviously leverages the distributed ledger. But I think for this conversation, what is interesting is that COVID, in all its horribleness, also provided a great kind of kick for people to come together and start collaborating. Things that used to take ages, and people were very skeptical of joining someone else's project, now are much more eager to join, because it's more important than their reluctance of collaboration.
Or egos.
Or egos.
It's interesting what you mentioned, Marta, because that COVID was actually the start for all these wonderful collaborations being kicked off. If you look back, and I think the three of you have been part of several great initiatives, some great collaborations. What are the lessons when you look back when it comes to, for example, the size of a collaboration or the governance within a collaboration? Because these are the topics that are currently also, well, they are being discussed. We also see this in the Netherlands, that these are quite some topics that people are still not sure about. So we're very eager to learn what your take is on that.
I can start since I was talking. I think that one of the biggest lessons that we learn by observing our members, right? Because we are in the nice position of not needing to kind of encourage people to work with us, because it's like, we need to encourage people to collaborate with each other. But one of the biggest lessons learned is what Jonathan just mentioned, which is you have to put your ego, leave the ego behind the door, because it really is about being equal and collaborating, and you can't just leverage the fact that you're a big organization to kind of bully the smaller organizations into your DLT consortium. In the DLT space, everybody's equal or should be equal. And I think the other, what comes from that as well is that actually technology is the least of our problems. When you build out a solution, technology is fairly solved, right? There are innovations that we need to create there, but most of the time we kind of have it figured out. We know how to do it. The human factor is what really is creates a winning or a losing situation.
Interesting. So it's really interesting what you mentioned, because I've seen in the Netherlands that the Dutch government actually sees blockchain technology as the key for complex ecosystems, for members coming together. Jonathan, I just saw on your slides that you have like an incredible amount of partners collaborating with each other. Has this been working out for you?
So it has been working out. I can also talk about failures very happily and success stories. So people will see the Unbounded and they're like, oh, wow, how did you guys come up with that? And, they don't see all the attempts that we already made over the last 5 years that didn't work out. So we will see all of the success stories. So one thing that is important, as Marta was saying, and, World Economic Forum and Nadia specifically is talking about, enterprises are not always built from the ground up to share. Like an enterprise is, they're concerned with the enterprise stuff, the employees, the shareholders, the sales. And when you come to tell everybody, hey guys, let's, sing the Kumbaya, let's hold hands, let's share everything. It sounds great at the beginning on phone notes. It doesn't always scale. Like everybody would like to kind of be part of a cool project and some press releases. But when we actually work with partners and we work with, in Mipasa, it's just members, our job is actually to make sure that people are comfortable with sharing, comfortable with being part of the network, comfortable with contributing stuff. This is why we have a lot of stuff around attribution. If somebody puts together a data set and helps us, it's very clear that that member actually is the one who did it. So there's a lot of work to do, even though people are equal and it's the same kind of wallets or the same identity holder, etc., etc. Some people and some participants actually do contribute more than others. And the challenge is actually to find the mechanism that keeps the incentivization thing going. Because, it's a very short-lived thing. Yeah, I really want to be in the press and I really want my logo being here and there. And we have more partners we talk about. Through the Hyperledger network, through the Ethereum Foundation network, we work through, because we've been in the space for quite some time, but we actually are not trying to find more friends. We're trying to find problems that are shared by many people, and it's actually the problems that bring us together. And then we find the right tech, right? So first we need to see, what is the actual problem? Is it fraud? Is it data synchronization? Is it the ability to consolidate reports? Am I spending 80% of my workforce on paying taxes or working out the accounts? Once people understand what is the actual problem, then there is enough technology stacks to put in place. But really, I think it's so good that World Economic Forum and so many large organizations, like international organizations, are actually putting together some guidelines, even in terms of terminology. What I'm doing with the token taxonomy framework, I'm not taking sides. I'm chairing, but it's not Jonathan thinks that we need an identity token. No. We need the members to come in and say, these are the problems that we have, and we would like to contribute and actually put energy and effort to solve these problems. If you're trying to solve a problem that is not a problem, it doesn't last. Well, it is for 3 months, 6 months, not 5 years.
We've seen that, yeah, of course. We have seen that in the beginning that blockchain was more used as a PR tool instead of just a technology that was actually solving issues. It's really interesting. Nadia, you just mentioned that not all these collaborations go as they should go. You're going to publish a white paper on dispute resolution. What are the key elements from this white paper? What are the key lessons? I don't, if you're already able to share this with the Dutch audience today.
Yes, well, I think very simple terms, and the paper has different frameworks, mechanisms, and options available for on-chain dispute resolution for enterprise-type systems. The real issue is simply that IT people don't understand law. Lawyers doesn't necessarily understand IT. And apologies to those few that wears many hats, but we don't speak the same language. And when a lot of the consortia, and Marta can also really speak to this, when they develop playbooks and their business network operation manuals and things like that, it does start off with much more of a technological view, which it should for sure, but then you're missing the data policy experts and the legal experts in that. So bringing this together, when you talk about collaboration, being able to bridge the gaps between these different functions and disciplines is really, really important. So I think when you talk about dispute resolution, and Marta was reading as well the white paper draft, we had multiple people comment and contribute and provide input and argue of what's right and what's wrong and what's the best and what's not the best. But you see it there, one group will say, this is fantastic, we understand everything, the legal. And then the business side is like, no, it's very legal, we need it more businessy. But then the IT people are like, no. So it's like, it's very difficult when you bring such a diverse group of people and disciplines and you're throwing the cultural notions, etc., together to actually then incorporate dispute resolutions in mechanisms in a forward-looking way, timely into your collaboration playbooks or business network operations manuals or whatever it's called for your consortia.
It's interesting what you mentioned because especially with the disputes, we just heard some great examples about all these blockchain implementations with a huge amount of participants. Marta, from your point of view, I'm very curious to learn, have you also seen some disputes, and of course we can treat them anonymously, but some disputes that are being raised in the past months, actually due to Corona, due to the global tensions that rose in the past months? Or is it actually the opposite? Is it actually getting better when we talk about convergence?
To be honest, I don't see it either way. I don't think that it's neither it is improving nor it's worse, at least from what I'm seeing. I think that the paper that Nadia mentioned about the dispute resolution, I think it's great. I was very happy with reading it and learning quite a lot about it. And the discussion or the findings in this paper and in the previous, the governance framework that World Economic Forum published, all of those kind of point to the same thing, which is that actually the DLT consortia are no different than other consortia in the way that in most cases, you do not have some kind of fancy on-chain governance models and automated resolution or anything like that. No, it's always there is some kind of minimum viable governance that says what will happen if we disagree, and there's some kind of either setup of agreement, reaching a consensus between the participants, or there is a third party that acts as an authority on decision making. So yeah, I think that it is still kind of, we treat DLTs as if it's some kind of a completely different way of thinking, and it does require a different way of thinking, but it really is about the distribution part is what we need to wrap our heads around, rather than the technology itself.
Yeah. Well, interesting. You mentioned like this is the case also with other consortia as well. Artificial intelligence, IoT, blockchain is also to be said to really be the great connector between all of these technologies. Jonathan, you also have been working on connecting these technologies with each other. What practical challenges and opportunities have you seen there?
So similar to what Martha was saying, that when you build a consortium, you have all this problem with governance, and do you have like a minimum viable governance? Do you have a viable governance? Like many consortiums, like on one dispute, the whole thing breaks down. So it's all okay, when in a good market. And what do you do when there are disputes? So I can talk about a few challenges that we see in production, because we run a few production networks, either as network managers or part of a consortium, or as advisors, or just people that run our tech. One thing that people forget about enterprise blockchains is actually the cost. And we see it in Mipasa too. So let's say there's a very big set of members, and they really care about some container management system with tax. But for them, it makes a lot of sense to have very, very strong computers with a lot of storage, and they care about transactions, and they transact several times an hour. And then there's a small supplier that comes in, and they need to share the costs. But they have one transaction once a month. How do we split the difference? Okay, do we pay the same way? Do we pay per transaction? Is there a minimum payment? So that kind of thing works in a small network. And in an environment we see when the network grows, we have to tell them, guys, this is not the POC anymore. This is runtime. It needs to be sustainable. So the people that usually initiate a blockchain project are not necessarily the ones that will actually take it to the next level. And if I talk as a startup guy, what you do pre-seed, what you do for Series A is not the same when you run a $20 million company. It's not the same when you're like going to IPO. It's different skills. I'm a CEO that is like really technical. Some CEOs, will completely overtake me when it's $1 billion company because they've done it for 20 years. So it's a different game. So when you start a blockchain project with 4 people and you want to get the economics right, you need one set of skills. When it goes to like, let's say up to 50 to 100 members, it's a different one. When you run what we do now that has kind of integration of big partners with a lot of consumers, now that universities, students, people running models, it's a completely different skill set. Now we have like UI issues, mobile support. So our team started with a blockchain team, then we started with an integration team. Now we need like mobile support, UI, models, machine learning, AI. So you have to be able to grow with the network and actually stay adaptive all the time, because it's not the one thing that you kind of set off in like 2016 and it works out 4 years later. Blockchain year is like, I don't know, if dog years is like 7 years, I think in blockchain every year is like 10 years, at least for what we see. At the pace that this is moving, you have to keep up also on the governance and the dispute resolutions. People can break the law even in the digital way. The law is the law is the law. The tax is the tax. It doesn't matter if it was a token, if it was like a suitcase of cash, or you just failed to report. Even as a blockchain network, it's the same challenge.
Yeah,
So
I'm thinking now, I can't say that, but I was told that there was one network that had to really think through the incentivization piece. As you've said, incentivizing, how do you incentivize? I mean, that's everything, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, I wasn't there myself to attest to this, but they had apparently more than 20 economists. I mean, I don't know how many of them, some of the top game theory specialists, experts, etc., in the room for I don't know how many weeks, just having to come up with the incentivization, the value allocation, etc. piece. It's we have a lot of work to do on there, a lot of exploration, which I also then think blockchain technology is an enabler with what it allows us to do.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Marta.
I just wanted to mention, because there is actually only today earlier today I had a call with a company that is building out a very serious network, and their trouble is finding people who will run the nodes, because most of the time the companies and serious companies are happy to join the network and transact on it. Why not? Great stuff. But why would I, that that have completely nothing to do with DLT. I'm not a technology company. Why do I have to run the node exactly? It's a completely different thinking and incentivizing people, because obviously most of the networks out there are still, 1-2 nodes run by one organization and everybody else is kind of just using the network. We don't see that many real kind of properly distributed multi-node networks with validators and so on. And the issue with incentives is a very big one. Also, when we think about identity, if we want to build out this global self-sovereign identity, how do we make sure that everybody's playing fair and some people are not doing too many verifications and claims, and others are, having to pay for the ledger rights and so on. So I think that this will be a very big problem as we move to production, right? As Jonathan was saying, while we were in the POC early production stage, we could have kind of survived with a single node networks, but if we are serious about this, we really can't.
Yeah. Well, we're talking now about incentivizing the members of the blockchain itself, the participants. There have been a couple of very interesting questions from the audience about this. One of them is actually about incentivizing the users of the blockchain. We're now talking about the partners that are actually being setting up this blockchain. But for example, in the Netherlands, we had some great examples about blockchain applications that are being built around health data. But how are you going to incentivize all the actors, the people that are actually going to use this blockchain, this application, like doctors, pharmacies, nurse takers, and so forth? This was one of the biggest challenges actually with the development, not the development of the technology itself, but incentivizing the users. And I'm very curious to learn if one of you has a great example of where this actually worked pretty well, if there has been some interesting methods that could be shared, or from the toolkit from Nadia, some interesting insights. But incentivizing the users, the practical users of these tools. Nadia, is there something in the toolkits? Is the toolkit from the...
I will keep it short. I'd love to hear from Jonathan within the medical piece. But for me, that goes back to how have you incentivized people 10 years ago, 20 years ago to use technology? How did you incentivize people to use the first Apple? Just because it's distributed ledger technology, a user should not care about what goes on behind the scenes. That's where your user interface and incentivization schemes, your business models, the regulatory piece, data ownership, data policy, all of those things become very important, but it's no different from any other application, just because that's my opinion, sort of really just coming down to the user. But like Jonathan, you operating in a more sensitive, data sensitive space.
Yeah, so I can give you a few examples, right? So we were a bit lucky with MiPasa because of the scale of the problem, right? So we were able to bootstrap the network in the sense that weather.com, for example, I don't want to do any advertisement, but weather.com has a lot of data that they actually sell the data. You can buy satellite data of weather forecasts, sun, temperatures, etc., etc. And they actually donated a lot of data until October 18th, 2020. And what we did, we just made it accessible. And once we were able to bootstrap with a lot of actually expensive data and just give it to the public, and all we did is just allow people to easily consume it, we actually learned what people want to do and how, and then we started giving them more data. And I'm going to get to the statistics in a second, but when we started with just COVID data, when we worked with Wharton, we had a big kind of Wharton MiPasa hackathon, they actually cared more about COVID than the economy. So now they wanted financial models. And then we were able to go to kind of financial data providers, say, look, we got some data from World Economic Forum. We work with all the big institutions and hospitals and governments who have partner network. We would like to do stuff with the economy. We started getting a ton of financial data. And we work with all the blockchains. We get a lot of Ethereum data and EOS data and Binance data. So the challenge normally is actually how to bootstrap And then I see many consortiums, and we are part of a few of them, over the years, like quite a few. We actually had the wrong model at the time because we had a big godfather that really wanted to run a network, and then it was easy. And when you start,
I'd love to know who that is. Sorry.
you know what I mean? Like somebody really wants this to succeed at all costs. And I'm like, okay. So we have a godfather, and then we're all gonna play nice. But what happens when the godfather leaves the room? Okay, and then are the kids still playing together or not? And then you realize, oh no, these guys are not friends. So what happened to us later on, once the network actually bootstrapped, we had enough value in terms of credit and attributions. And we started something that actually somebody at Hyperledger taught me. And he said, look, we have an ambassador program. Try to give people credit for contribution, for bug reporting, for being an ambassador, and give them like a medal. And I literally learned that. I said, oh, really? I didn't know. Yeah, people really care about that, especially now that they're remote. So what we started to do, we put together, I know it sounds like a small thing, but we have hundreds of users just that contribute data for free. And why? Because we had like a model warrior, the person who had like the most influential kind of model, in all of these hackathons, Consensus Health, Stanford, MIT, Wharton Hackathon, we had a few, IBM Call for Code. So we started giving people credit for contributing. And that model is actually still working because now we're getting more and more data and more people running models against this data. Yep. Some of it is public data, some of it is private data. But the bootstrapping thing actually made sense just because of the momentum. Now it's a much more kind of very visible network and platform, and we have different use cases now. But now we found a way to reward people that actually bring stuff to the network. Yeah. And even that was enough. We didn't need to pay. We just needed to make people feel that they help.
Yeah, but that's always great in times of crisis that people are actually really offering their help. And I totally agree with Nadia as well. What I've seen in the Netherlands is that lots of consumers were not aware of the fact that they were already using blockchain technology and they didn't care as long as it was just working out. So, but it was a very interesting question from actually somebody that is actually working on blockchain applications in the healthcare. It's what we just heard. Sometimes there are a lot of people involved. We just heard 20 economists sitting at a table talking about incentivizing. What's like, I think it's a quote from Mark Zuckerberg, move fast, break things. Are we sometimes not going too fast or too slow? And what are the risks here? Marta, what is your take on that?
I think we are both moving too fast and too slow. It's this absurd situation where on one hand, we should be thinking more long term. And in that way, I am concerned that we are not moving fast enough. What I mean by this is we're building solutions based on some technology that is supposed to provide immutability. Is supposed to provide, is basically supposed to be there in 100 years' time, right? If we set up a blockchain network, in theory, in 100 years' time, it should be the same blockchain network running and being used. But we are not thinking in those terms. We are thinking in terms of traditional, databases, traditional software, where after a year or 2 years, we can just go throw away everything, do a completely incompatible update, and just move everyone to version 10.x, just because. That's not as easy when we're talking about the DLTs. And in that way, I think that there has to be more thinking put into long-term strategy for building DLT networks. But then again, we are moving incredibly fast, and everybody's running very much to going into production, to putting things or proving the value of blockchain, which also leads to troubles with a lot of skepticism that is now being established, right? It used to be that you could just go into a room of VCs and say blockchain, 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 and you got a very nice funding.
Sure.
And right now, it's quite the opposite, right? If you say blockchain, you are much rather will be asked to leave the room.
Where are the skeptic about?
I don't know. It depends.
I think there is a lot of skepticism. The way that I'm looking at it is, or the thing that I'm seeing is the most successful of our members are not even revealing the fact that they are building using a DLT. If you ask them, they're very open about it. They will tell you all about it. But if they pitch it to a customer or to an investor, we just build really good stuff.
Yeah, I think it was also in a report by PricewaterhouseCoopers that most of the blockchain projects are actually not being revealed, so just kept as a corporate secret. So I'm curious to learn from Nadia with, you as an organization, as the World Economic Forum, definitely have sped up all kinds of conversations and collaborations between all partners from all over the world. With the current tensions between countries that arise during the corona crisis, do you think this will affect these collaborations? And if so, in what perspective?
So, Marta and Jonathan spoke to it when they were asked at the beginning the lessons from this year. It's the willingness. It's not the technology. There's enough technological innovations happening. We'll sort out the tech stuff. What it comes down to is the willingness, right, of these countries to work together. And I think to also add to that, to go back to my keynote, the role of policy and regulation and the role of data policy. I think we're very focused sort of on blockchain. Will people interoperate with blockchain? I think the importance of how countries are viewing their data as assets, their national wealth, how they are treating GDPR regulations, other data policy, I think will have a huge impact on how blockchain is able to scale in other technologies in the future. We don't always see these tensions play out in very straightforward ways. It might come years later through policies and things that's implemented that to the normal eye doesn't seem that significant, but can actually have quite an impact. Which is also why I really encourage blockchain practitioners and so to really lean into as well the data policy and other regulatory side of things.
Right. Unfortunately, we have to round off. I think we can talk for hours with the three of you, but in the end, we are live virtually, and the viewers at home already have seen some great keynotes. But I would like to close this session with the question to the three of you. We're living now in turbulence, fast changing times. How do you see collaboration happening within the blockchain industry in the upcoming, let's say 3 years? What is the wildest dream? What is the most interesting thing that should be worked on? Very curious on your thoughts. In the upcoming 3 years, collaboration in the blockchain atmosphere. Jonathan, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. I think there are three things. We need to sort out digital identity. I think we have a lot of issues with governance here, including prices and cost and how to get it to work. And I think we still are so far away from interoperability. Blockchain should be something that actually disappear. It shouldn't be in the discussion. I go and I take my Visa and I swipe and it works. And I don't know how it was built and what works and how many nodes and operators are there. I'm just happy to get, the payments going through. And we need to get to that. So identity, governance, and interoperability. These are my three kind of things. Yeah.
Marta?
Yeah, I think that in 3 years' time, I would like to see very good guidelines and frameworks for creating a governance model of the DLTs. The work that World Economic Forum is just brilliant because we really need that. We really need best practices in everything that has to do with building out networks. And then, I do hope that more of the pan-national organizations, your UN, World Food Programs, and so on, will come out with all the projects that they're working on, because this will drive the adoption. If the most trusted organizations will be clear about building those DLT networks, this will encourage people to also do this, to follow that route.
Yeah. Well, Nadia, there's a lot of kind words about the work. I think the World Economic Forum already has a little framework for governance within blockchain, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and I would say, we would then also add to that how we see very much in the next few years a world where we can, where an individual will have more right and control over the data, where they can actually set permissioning around what their data can be used for, around purposes. So as Nadia, I allow permissions around my data to be used in these ways. I'm happy for it to be used for rare diseases. I do not want it to be used for something else. And I think blockchain technology that can help with enabling such permissioning around data. So for me, I'm seeing data exchanges, SME, or the forum, really looking at data exchanges where we can not just focus on the protection of data, which of course is very important, needs to be ethically and fairly written, but where we can really think around how do we allow data to be shared and used for different purposes with the permission and fairly equitable allocation of risks and rewards to individuals and citizens.
By the way, that's exactly what we focus on like for 3 years. That's the biggest problem we see as well. Yeah.
We need to talk, Jonathan.
Yes.
Wow, great connection. Marta, Nadia, and Jonathan, many thanks. Really, many thanks for kicking off this Dutch Blockchain Week with your keynotes, with your contribution to this event, also to the panel. We are very grateful for you offering your time and being with us today. Many thanks for your inputs, and we hope to see you soon in the Netherlands at one of our future events. Thanks.
I promise you will.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jan.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.